crossed almost 100 users. So we'll just start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants who have joined in this first ever GPAI data governance convening that we have scheduled today. And it's my honor and privilege to welcome all the participants along with our working group members, experts, and in particular, Inma Martinez from the plenary chair, the multi-stakeholder experts group, the MEG plenary chair, and steering committee co-chair. So the intent for organizing this, of course, is to give a platform for all the experts to share the work that's going on in the working groups, to get feedback, and to ensure that we are together aligned with the objectives of the GPAI. So let me start the session formally with my opening remarks. So I thank everyone for joining this, the first of the working group convenings today, because we have, as you know, we have 4 working groups, and we will be having different convenings in the days to come in the run-up to the GPAI summit that we are planning to host in December, from the 12th of December. So as the incoming chair of GPAI, we are organizing these convenings with support from the GPAI Secretariat, the MEG expert group, the MEG plenary chair, and the Center of Excellence in Canada and France. And the objective is to raise awareness with regard to the work being done by the working groups. The 4 working groups that we have in GPAI, one is on data governance, responsible AI, innovation and commercialization, and future of work. So when we look at especially the buzz that AI has created, especially generative AI and all, so the work being done by expert groups in all these 4 sectors becomes all the more relevant. So the rapid advances that we are seeing in the potential of AI innovation has pushed all of us, all governments, including India, to foster several multilateral and bilateral partnerships to share AI R&D, to build AI solutions, to address the risks related to AI based on commonly agreed democratic principles, to ensure that the ethical, responsible AI principles are followed by one and all, and we are able to together build up a scenario in which build up an ecosystem which promotes trust in the use of this technology. And this has become like countries across, in every forum that we are part of, this is being debated on, and they're being debated on how we can ensure that the frameworks of responsible AI is not only adhered in practice, but in theory, but also in practice. And this can only be achieved by enhanced global cooperation, in order to ensure that we work together towards common objectives, towards common goals, in responsible use of technology, and ensuring that we are able to use the power of technology for the larger social good. And GPAI is one of such multi-stakeholder initiative which seeks to bring together all key stakeholders in this initiative, and it brings together experts from civil society, from industry, from governments, for international organization. And the work which experts are doing is actually precisely meant to bridge the gap between theory and practice on responsible AI. It supports cutting edge research, applied activities on AI-related priorities, ensuring diversity, ensuring inclusion, ensuring use of AI for economic growth. And we, being a founder member of GPAI, have these shared aspirations with other member countries, and we are deeply committed to the cause. And as we said, that these working group convenings that we have organized is in the run-up to the GPAI summit, and it will also give us a feedback with regard to how to structure the sessions, in what ways we can together help ensure knowledge sharing between the working groups and member countries, and ensure that the work which is being done by the experts is actually leveraged by various countries when they are devising their own AI policies. It will also ensure collaboration, knowledge sharing between the entire the experts, as also the external ecosystem, whether they are from the academia, whether they are from the industry. And the adoption of the work will create real value in this, and that would ensure that the expert reports are not confined to only GPAI meetings every year, but they are also kind of see their adoption in applications of AI that various countries are working on. Today, we'll be focusing on data governance, and we all know that access to quality data sets is a fundamental prerequisite for AI innovation and AI adoption. Data governance policies and models are required to ensure robust access to data sets, while we at the same time we ensure protection of privacy, security, the security, data security, and trust of citizens. It's a delicate balance in trying to ensure that data is made available for development of AI solutions, but at the same time, we don't compromise on privacy and data security. And we have been, like India has been one of the first countries to recognize the importance of streamlining access to data. We came up with our national data sharing and access policy way back in 2012, and we set up our open data platform, which has got more than 600,000 data sets that are available for open access. And we, in tune with the requirements that we are seeing for development of AI-based solutions, and especially with the projects that we have been taken for the digital transformation in our country in various sectors, agriculture, healthcare, education, financial inclusion. We are also coming up with a national data governance policy, which will ensure anonymization policies, which will ensure privacy preservation while we provide data sets for AI innovation and research. The mandate of the GPAI Data Governance Working Group is very closely aligned with the GPAI's overall mission. The working group aims to collate evidence, shape research, undertake applied AI projects, and provide expertise on data governance. And this will help promoting leveraging data in such a way that we are consistent with the need of diversity, inclusion, innovation, economic growth, societal benefit. And we use it for furtherance of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So today's convening we will be hearing from the experts who will share the work that they have done, and they will also be presenting the future roadmap and identify areas in which member countries can work together for furthering the cause of data governance. So we look forward to hearing from each of the project co-leads of the Data Governance Working Group. And I hope that the discussion that will happen between the experts and the members who have joined today will help us in further fine-tuning our policies and ensuring that the work leads to real output. And I welcome all the experts for joining us in these proceedings. And I would also hope that all of the people who joined today will also be joining for the GPAI Summit in December, and will further help shape up the agenda for the GPAI in the years to come. And I would also like to thank the GPAI Secretariat hosted by OECD, Mr. Allen in particular, for providing us all the support for organizing this. My own team members who have been working very hard to ensure that we are able to reach out to all the stakeholders. We have more than 150 participants who have joined today. And that's a testimony that even though we are organizing it at a short notice, there is a lot of interest across the world with regard to the work which has been done by the expert groups. And this is the first such convening, and we'll have 3 more convenings before the main summit. And I'm sure that will help us, in all of us, in becoming more aware about the work around the working groups. So I once again welcome all the experts who have joined today, and especially the MEG chair for giving her time for this convening meeting today. So with these words, I will go ahead and invite our next speaker. Has Mr. Avrin joined, the French National Coordinator for AI? So while we await him, I would request Inma Martinez, the multi-stakeholder experts group plenary chair and steering committee co-chair, who has been a pillar of support for organizing this session today, to deliver a keynote address.
Thank you so much. We have prepared some slides. So if we move to the first one. So the expert group is an engaged international community of some of the most prominent AI practitioners who collectively deliver insights, strategies, but also assets to the GPAI Council members. And it is a rich collective of academics, professionals in private and public sectors, AI pioneers and entrepreneurs that address the most relevant and prominent issues affecting artificial intelligence and how it creates progress and social welfare in the world. The expert group, the MEG, as we call it, works in projects that matter now and in the future, and it deals with issues that are known and expected, but also potentially unknown and challenging. If we move to the next slide, the expert groups, since its year of launch in 2020, which was the year of the pandemic, very stressful year to start a project such as this, The working groups provide specific deliverables around 4 different pillars of societal development. How we must develop an artificial intelligence that is trustworthy and human-centric, as well as demonstrative of data governance in all of its manifestations and derivations, which is supported in Canada by the CEMIA. And we have another 2 working groups on how governments must prepare for humans in terms of how they will work, how we will develop skills, how we will educate people in an AI-driven society, as well as how AI is making inroads into small and medium enterprises across all sectors, creating innovation, and being these 2 groups supported by Francis Iria. The current priorities, which is the next slide, that we have agreed for the year 2024, in which the government of India will hold the office of the presidency and the GPAI are, first off, how we must create AI assets as pillars of a resilient society, knowing the challenges ahead and preparing for them. Continuing strengthening our efforts to mitigate the effects of climate change across humanity, nature, and the animal kingdoms, and making AI a powerful and effective tool. Ensuring that the future society is built upon strong human rights across all developed and in development countries, a topic in which the Data Governance Group in particular has done an outstanding work, and that we expect further relevant projects that will continue to support this core priority for the GPAI. And lastly, to ensure that healthcare across all nations is supported by AI to address future pandemics that will require international coordination and cooperation. The work of the expert group is thus incredibly relevant in society today and unique in its insights for the multi-skills of the experts and the international scope of our approaches. And we are very excited at the prospect of delivering higher outcomes under India's leadership and presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Inma, for giving the overview of the projects that are being taken under each working group and setting the priorities for the coming year. Now, I would request Dr. Jenny Tennyson, the Executive Director, co-chair for the GPAI Data Governance Working Group, to introduce the working group and also call upon all the experts to share their insights with regard to the work that has been done. So, Dr. Jenny.
Thanks so much, and thank you very much for organising this opportunity to really showcase the work that we have been doing over the last few years and is currently underway. So I'm Jenny Tennyson. I'm Executive Director of a small campaigning organisation called Connected by Data, and I'm co-chair of the Data Governance Working Group. My other co-chair, Maya Bogataj-Yancic, is unfortunately not able to join us today because of a clashing appointment, but we have been working well since the founding of GPAI in 2020. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Naomi. As has already been outlined, our mandate as the Data Governance Working Group is really to look at the role of data and the way it is collected and used and shared and archived and deleted to support AI and applied AI. We are particularly focused on the way in which data can support the broader goals of GPAI. So that means advancing human rights, inclusion, diversity, as well as innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit, and meeting those UN Sustainable Development Goals, while also tackling the particular priorities that Inma talked about in terms of, for example, how we might focus data governance work and attention on climate change, on health, and on the other kinds of priorities that have been outlined. So we are going to very quickly run through the different projects, 5 of the projects that we've been working on over the last couple of years. And for each of these projects, we have one of the leads of the piece of work to talk through what's been done in that project. We would love you to raise any questions that you have about these pieces of work. And we would also love you to raise any questions that you have about what our future work could look like. We're currently in the process of putting together our work plan for next year and getting feedback on the kinds of questions and challenges that you're encountering will really help us to nail down what those other projects should be. So just to give you a high level outline of the projects that we're going to go through, we're going to talk about our work around data justice and how we've looked at developing policy proposals and recommendations in order to advance data justice. And that goes beyond kind of just equality issues or bias issues, but really thinking about the role that data has in providing equity in our societies and across the world. We're going to talk about the role of data institutions. So that's organizations that are set up to facilitate sharing of data, collection and sharing of data, and the kinds of things that need to be put into place to make them function effectively. Those are two projects that the majority of work was done last year. And then we have 3 projects that are ongoing at the moment. One is on, or just starting up, one is on co-generated data. So this is particularly relevant in the world of generative AI, where AI is produced off the back of lots of data sets that are brought together that hold rights from lots of people. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about our project on privacy enhancing technologies, and other rights enhancing technologies. So how we can support access to data in ways that preserve rights, and privacy is one of those rights. And then we're going to talk about a new project we've been kicking off about the role of government as a provider of data for AI. We've already heard about how open data is a core part of supporting innovation around data and AI, but we want to look more closely at the role of government plays there. So that's what we're going to go through over the next little while. Please put any questions in the Q&A box as they come up to you, and we'll have 20 minutes at the end, hoping everybody sticks to time, where we'll be able to answer those questions. So I'm going to hand over first, if you can flip the slide, please, Naomi, to Alison Gilward, who is going to talk us through our work on data justice. Alison, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and good morning to everyone. Naomi, in the interest of time, if we can just go straight on to the next slide, please. So the work of the data justice work project stream was really concerned with the developing of practical guidance for policymakers, developers, and technical communities, these 3 components that we thought were critical to getting data justice outcomes, in order to understand how data injustice is perpetuated by data-driven technologies and by the underlying and mutually reinforcing structural and digital inequality. So the real issues we have were unpacking some of the structural inequalities that impact on the uneven distribution of harms in society and with the application of data-driven technologies, but very importantly also the uneven distribution of opportunities. And I think this is where the data justice work really advanced on some of the earlier academic data justice work, which was looking at mainly social justice issues. And this really drew in very strongly the economic justice issues and the need for economic regulation to ensure better distribution of opportunities, not only managing the negative impact of harms. The purpose was also to provide a high level but very practical starting point for stakeholders to engage with data justice and understand data justice across diverse and across the globe, focusing on social and economic aspects of data justice, as I mentioned. And the key deliverables here were really this enormous, really fabulous resource that is available on the website, this literature review, which was done together with the Alan Turing Institute, which produced comprehensive guidelines for data justice and looks at the impacts on communities, on users, developers, and of course the implications for policy making. And then the second set of deliverables was a series of primers, or in fact 2 main primers on explaining the economic and social justice underpinnings of data justice. And these are distilled into a hopefully digestible and manageable policy brief to promote learnings and findings on data justice and data justice practices, or practices that might produce data justice. Thanks, Naomi. Next slide, please. And so really the highlights of this research was that we tried to move towards sort of concrete solutions. There's been a lot of advocacy, there's been a lot of theory. We really tried to work practically from narrow, sort of individualized notions of privacy and data protection to broader collective decision-making and data governance of data, picked up into many of the other projects that we're looking at. We were really looking at how we could advance social and economic justice in the context of AI and data-driven technologies, and leading to a change, we hope, in the behavioral and collaboration between the multi-stakeholder partners in GPAI. But also, very importantly, we're keen to get this expression and voice from the global south and from particularly lower and middle income countries in the development of AI and responsible AI that is taking place in many of them. In this regard, we worked with 12 partners to produce a policy pilot, or to run a policy pilot that gain perspectives from the field in these very diverse contexts in Africa and Asia and in Latin America, with a focus on low and middle income countries in particular. So the important aspect of this project, I think, already is that it's had not a lot of impact on a number of the other projects, not only within the working group, but we've also worked with climate change and a number of other important working groups. And so the member, adopting this project has become quite important. Not only within GPAI expert groups are working together, but also member states have thrown some weight behind this. And through the Alan Turing Institute, we were also able to leverage a 1.1 million grant to support research in this area. So there's already been some traction from member states and some support for this really important research. Thank you very much.
Did you want to talk about the next steps, Alison? There was a final slide, or?
Yes, I think I could just quickly highlight that for that. So I think what we are going to be doing over this period, and we actually are involved in already, is to try and develop meaningful dialogues with governments. There's an awareness campaign that we're in the process of developing at the moment with member states, trying to open discussions on how to implement the recommendations and principles. And we're hoping that resulting from this project's work to evoke commitments that reach beyond good, responsible and beneficial artificial intelligence and machine learning. There are already engagements with several regional initiatives in Africa in particular, but in other parts of the world. And so this engagement, taking this research to practice, to policy implementation is a very important part of the work going forward. And we'll continue to build on the project's foundational learnings to help influence and shape ongoing and future projects. Obviously, the emerging issues, the generative AI issues that have come up, that have been spoken about here, profoundly, raising issues around data injustice and the perpetuation of historical injustices that we might see. And of course, very importantly, other areas that we work very closely with data institutions, with the PETS project that you'll hear about now, but also, as I mentioned, the biodiversity work. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks so much, Alison. Again, I'll remind you to please put any questions in the Q&A box through the Zoom client, and we'll ask Teki to give us an overview of our work on data institutions.
Thank you, Jenny. So our work dates some time back with an initial research around data stewards and data institutions. Can you move to the next slide, please? And this particular work was meant to really investigate and map out the local data ecosystem, particularly around climate-induced migration, in order to have a full breadth and understanding of what is required to support affected institutions. In the end, what we hope to achieve was a framework of trustworthy data institutions that actually improve how data is collected, how it is stewarded, shared, and used within the community. As part of the work, we have developed an interim report based on the case study that was conducted in Cameroon. And then we are currently working on the final version of what we call a data institutional framework tool, which will be available very shortly. Can we move to the next slide, please? So in terms of the highlights of what we found in our work, we realized, and the reason why we're doing this is because we realized that building that trustworthy ecosystem is very fundamental to really achieving the right data governance structures within the ecosystem. And in order to do that, we noted the importance of bringing on board the data governance issues, the infrastructure and tools that are generally being used to collect and process information within communities, as well as the people and the organizations that are required to build the trust and safe ecosystem. We came out with what we call the trust infrastructure framework, where we have identify various actors within the space, the organizations that are required to actually steward this leadership to ensure that data is collected, processed, and used in a manner that benefits the entire ecosystem. And some of the key components that we identified in ensuring trust include data governance itself, training of institutions that are required in the process, the infrastructure and tools itself, as well as the collection and the processing processes and the data storage. Now, in terms of the maturity and evaluation tool itself, we identified 4 main areas that we developed this maturity or evaluation tool around. The first one is the governance area, where I am actually looking on, good, okay. I was having a problem with reading clearly. So we identified the data governance aspects that had several variables which we have developed that will be used in assessing, the maturity of any organization collecting and processing data within this space. And we are looking at things like the governance structure itself, the policies that surround data collection and use, the security and safety measures, whether or not there are transparency measures in place, what are the legal and regulatory compliance issues that needs to be addressed with, and the sustainability modules that have been put in place. We also identify the indicator of shared resources, where particularly we're looking at whether or not data is being developed and shared within this ecosystem, and the infrastructure and the tools that have actually been developed to enable such sharing as well. In terms of community, what we were looking at was community participation, community engagements in co-design and co-creation, ownership and agency from the community perspective, literacy, that is particularly data literacy around what information is collected and used, as well as the uses to which communities that participate in such data collection and sharing are able to also benefit from uses of such information. Then last but not the least, one of the indicators which is part of the evaluation maturity tool is around rules, where we're looking at what are the rules of operation, both at the national, international, and when we say community level or corporate level, that addresses issues around transparency, issues around ethics, accountability, and participation as well. In all, the essence of the evaluation tool is to enable any organization that works within this ecosystem to be able to get in and then use this evaluation tool to assess where they are as an organization, identify where the gaps are with regard to the trust framework, and then be able to map out and develop a consistent program that can enable them achieve a trust framework within their sharing ecosystem. Can I have the next slide, please? In terms of the next steps, what we are currently doing now is a lot of engagements around the framework and the indicators to find out, particularly from institutions, whether or not this framework and the indicators are good enough to stand the test of time. So we are undertaking a number of interviews and also engaging with GIZ Cameroon to help with implementation of the framework as well. In terms of longer term, I think for this purpose, one of the things that would also ask is if there are others here that particularly may be interested in also working with us to test the framework, to assess the basis for some of those indicators. We will come up and work with them to help us develop a very useful tool. At the end of the day, our objective is to be able to automate this framework so that anybody working within the data ecosystem can use it to really assess where they stand when it comes to having a trustworthy data institution. I think, Jenny, thank you.
Thank you very much, Teki. And in the interest of time, I'll move us on quickly to Shamik, who would be talking about our Pets Plus project. Shamik, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. If you can move to the first place. So my name is Shamik Kundu. I work at an AI trust company in Singapore. I should mention my project co-lead is Kim McGrail. She can't be here because it's very early in Canada where she is based. The project is also being executed with strong support and leadership from the Singapore government agency, IMDA, and the Ministry of Health here, and also collaborations from various other parts of the world. You can read what's on the slide. I'll try and talk to you a little bit about the context of this project. The context, of course, is that if you look at AI for good, and Mr. Singh already referred to that as part of his plans for India, for example, it seems quite obvious that in order to achieve the big AI for good objectives, we need a lot of data, which often sits in different sources. And there are concerns around privacy when that is shared. There's concerns around IP rights, on various other kinds of rights. And so the promise of privacy enhancing technologies and other adjacent technologies seems obvious. And yet, at the time that we were looking out, with the exception of one or two projects, I think there was one with the UN census and a couple of others, there were very few examples at scale of pets being used to deliver kind of AI for good kind of objectives. So that was the context. And we said, actually, let's try and focus on a technical demonstration. And of course, around that technical demonstration, there would be guidance for different stakeholder groups. There'd be an outreach plan and other further development, etc. So that was the context. If you can move to the next page, please. So therefore, as I mentioned, the objective was to focus on concrete solutions. We got funding in partnership with the IMDA in Singapore, as I mentioned. We had dialogues with multiple government agencies and departments in Singapore, Canada, USA, New Zealand, and France. We also hooked up with an international other international initiatives, such as the ones in the logos that you see below, like the CDAI in the UK, etc. All of that was good in terms of sharing sharing the current who's doing what in the pet space. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about the biggest challenge we faced as we went about trying to find an appropriate use case. One thing we realized is that there's a big gap between the potential that pets hold and perhaps even the technical maturity that they have, which is all good, and the difficulty of getting data owners and data custodians to actually get to a stage where they're able to visualize the benefits from sharing data, and come up with the organizational backing to do that. So we spent several months, if you can go to the next slide, actually. No, sorry, so this is the project we finally ended up with. But before we got to this stage, we spent several months looking around the world for potential use cases that could benefit from this. And it's not that the use cases weren't there, but practical implementation where people were ready with the problem statement that required data to be shared, and those data custodians were willing to apply pets and try it out, was quite difficult. Anyway, finally, we managed to find a project close to home, for me at least, which was with the Singapore's Ministry of Health. A couple of models that were created, actually a model that was published in 2021, created in 2020 at the height of the pandemic with consent from passengers and crew. So just to give you an idea of what the project was, there was an existing model with the original, I guess, unprotected data, which was obviously not available to a large group, but to a very small group. And they came up with certain outcomes from a pandemic modeling perspective. And the objective of this project, which is still underway, we're in the last stages of testing, was to say, how can we apply PET's technology, in this case, I think homomorphic encryption from memory, to protect the crucial elements of the data, again, from memory, the device and the exact timestamp on which the two individuals were close to each other. So that kind of a proximity model. And using that, recreating the network of people and how they were exposed to each other for how long. And then looking at the outcomes. Do we get similar comparable outcomes when we run this predictive model using pet protected data compared to what we would have got with unprotected data? And if the answer is yes, that kind of starts proving that yes, you can get outcomes that you would have only thought you can get with like the raw data using these kinds. And of course, that's one element. The other element is what is the cost in terms of compute and effort. And that was one of the big lessons as well, which is actually by using data cleverly, for example, by focusing on the few variables that make a difference, we're able to execute this with far less computational overhead and complexity than you would otherwise do. So that's where we are. We have another few weeks of testing to be done. If you can go to the next page, I think that's the next steps page. So that completing that technical demonstration on better health use cases, and then using that to finalize some of the practical lessons learned and outreach. We are still open for additional demonstrations, particularly around climate action and future of work. So we kind of have a template now. If there are other use cases, this is again an open call. If you have a use case where you think you could benefit from application of pets, we'd love to explore that. But in parallel, we'll of course also continue to engage with other pet initiatives, including in the US, UK, and elsewhere in the world, to compare notes and to kind of expand the conversation in this space. So that's it in a summary. We all know the power of privacy enhancing technologies, in theory, to bring together data that can then be used for AI for good. This was about proving that it can actually be done in a very practical context. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Shamik. And I will move us on. And thanks for all the questions that are coming. Please do keep them coming. I'll move us on to the project from co-generated data to generative AI, or the CoGen, as we call it. Christiana, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Christiane Wenderhorst. I have a background in law, and I'm calling in from Vienna in Austria. It's my pleasure and honor to chair the advisory group on this new project. So unlike Shamik, we can't present you any kind of results yet, because where we are is that we have just started to publish an RFP, and we are in the process of signing a contract with a delivery partner. Next slide, please. So what are the objectives of our project? We know that in the digital economy, things don't work in the way they used to work in the analog economy. We don't have the very traditional value chains we see in the analog economy. So we see very different models of co-generation, co-opetition, and we want to conceptualize them. Starting with existing concepts of co-generation, which we see in data law, which we see in IP law, but which we see also outside the legal realm, and then analyze them and see how these concepts can be applied in an AI-specific context. And in particular, we want to look at how can they work, or are they adequate to work in the context of generative AI of the kind we are seeing today and maybe tomorrow. So by doing so, we want to contribute to a transnational convergence of policies, not only from a legal perspective, but including from a legal perspective. So the task for our delivery partner is to develop principles that integrate all these concepts which we find and come up with something new, something that is maybe more adequate to grapple with the problems we see. And of course, we don't want to have just theoretical research. We also want to come up with very concrete policy options and recommendations. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights, we would like to start with the term co-generated data, which was originally coined by the American Law Institute and the European Law Institute, and that refers to situations where data is generated by a number of actors. Now that model has already been adopted by a number of players around the world, but it is something that has not been developed with AI in mind specifically, and it's mostly been developed with regard to individual actors. So there is really a need to test this model more specifically in the context of AI, and to test whether it works only for data or also for what we would like to call content, or different different digital outputs. And that links back to the data justice project. The question is, can we use the concepts on co-generated data that have been developed for individual parties? Do they work for collective data rights? So do they, can we say that, for example, data has been generated by people from a certain continent? Does that automatically give individuals from that continent or states from that continent collective data rights in the data so generated, or in content so generated? Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? I already said we're right at the beginning in the process of signing a contract with our delivery partner. The delivery partner will start by analyzing what is out there, and then examine whether what is out there fits for what the challenges are nowadays. And in particular with regard to, does it work for AI? Does it work for content? Does it work for collective situations? And then hopefully come up with something that is very concrete and very useful and can be taken to the next level by policymakers worldwide and also private partners. So we are very much looking forward to this project and to the cooperation with the delivery partners and all bodies of GPAI. And given that we're so at the beginning, we would really appreciate any comments, any suggestions you may have. So very happy to discuss after in the discussion phase. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christiana. And our final project that we're going to give a summary of is the role of government as a provider of data for AI. And Rachel Adams, who is our delivery partner in this, is going to summarize this project for us. So Rachel, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Adams. I'm also based with Alison Gilwald at Research ICT Africa. And we are working with our partners at the Data for Development Network, which is a global coalition of research institutions working on data and AI policy and governance based in the Global South to help us deliver on this project. So we can go to the next slide. We have really just started. We signed the contract earlier this month, and we're just establishing our kind of team and working relationship as we move forward with this exciting work. So the idea is that we want to support governments in understanding how they should best share the data they steward for AI development that is in the public interest and that drives the realization of sustainable development goals. So part of the intended impact is to increase the availability of publicly held data in ways that are responsible, that are grounded in the principles of human rights, inclusion, diversity, innovation, and economic growth as per GPAI's mandate, and also to reduce some of the risks and the potential worries that are arising around how governments might be sharing data and with which actors, so that there is increased trust in the public use and availability of data. We hope to generate a series of examples from different country contexts around the world to ground the practices that we are seeing in sharing of government data, and then to take 3 very specific case studies to explore in detail the different governance models that are being used, the different technical facilities, and the different ways in which issues around public trust, for example, are being managed. And then finally, the project hopes to bed down a series of guiding principles to aid governments and policymakers around the world in designing responsible governance approaches to the sharing of government data for AI or with third-party data providers. We can move to the next slide, please. So we are doing this project based on the understanding that government is uniquely placed to create not just an enabling policy environment for the responsible data sharing for the development of AI, but also as a provider of data. The data that is held by governments is often representative of the whole of society, rather than just select market groups that you might find with private actors, and includes a wide range of social data that's particularly important for the development of AI that might support the realization of sustainable development goals. So we've got a list of some of the different categories of data being held here: health records, benefits data, census information, and so forth. And as I think mentioned, innovators might find this data particularly useful while developing AI, but there have been concerns that have arisen about how to ensure that this data is responsibly handled, that privacy is respected, but also broader issues in relation to digitalization of government records and legacy issues that may impact upon the quality of data being held by governments around the world. So ultimately, we hope that this project will support in reducing concerns around the risks of sharing public data for AI and provide clear guidance, use cases, and policy options that demonstrate to governments how this can be done and how this can be done safely and responsibly. Last slide, please. So our next steps is that we are conducting a globally representative survey to understand current practices that governments are using to share data with AI developers, the different governance models being used, and so forth. Then to develop out of this the 3 illustrative case studies where we'll go into much further detail and look at the different safeguards and mechanisms and technical facilities being used and so forth. We're also going to be conducting a kind of horizon scanning exercise to think in bigger, broader terms around the future use of government data for AI, which I think is where some of these questions around generative AI is going to really augment the conversation. We've got a specific interest in looking at how healthcare data, energy and climate data, and social benefits data is and can be used to support responsible AI development, both nationally and internationally. So those are our next steps. I think we might be reaching out to many of you, and please do get in touch if you're interested to share any examples or expertise with the team. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And now we're going to quickly move to Sophie, who runs the SEMIA Centre, which provides us just with excellent support as a working group, to talk a little bit about the role of the expert support centres in GPAI. We've not got very much time left, Sophie, so if you can keep it brief, that would be great.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jenny. So yes, we wanted to share a few words on the work of the Expert Support Center to give to all a better view of the kind of mechanics of a working group, but as well to give you an idea of different potential ways of for the ecosystem to engage with the working group. And I saw in the chat 2 questions around that, so a few ideas perhaps there to explore. So the Expert Support Centers, as the name says, support the GPAI activities and projects. So basically, we support the experts community and the working groups into developing and implementing high-impact projects in responsible AI. So concretely, what does it mean in our day-to-day life and the day-to-day life of the working group? If you can move on to the next slide. Basically, we plan and support the day-to-day of the working group, from planning and organizing working group meetings to the support also related to conducting projects, which can entail planning, managing the project, support, providing administrative support related to, as an example, contracting, to developing partnerships related to contracting. So when we have delivery partners, when we want to develop partnerships and we want to engage with developers, with an advisory committee, with delivery partners, we are there to support these kinds of aspects. We also very much support when there's a question of reaching out to low middle income countries and engaging them into the conversation and partnerships. And the data justice project that was presented by Alison was a good example of the kind of exercise or convening that we support in. We also support organization of events such as today's workshop or a town hall that was organized a few weeks ago. Finally, we administer and engage financial contributions. So from seed funding to really scaling up the support of the different projects. Also keeping in mind that since we're supporting several working groups, we make sure that we coordinate in a transversal manner at the level of the different working groups. So as an illustration of what we do, the next slide really illustrates our role as kind of a steering wheel between further challenges and need expressed by the members, but also a catalyst of impact that is delivered by the experts community through seed funding and providing a project management structure for kicking off the project, engaging with key partners from science sector, private sector, civil society, and international organization to scale up the projects, also from funding and in contributions. Very much focused around delivering and supporting the experts group into delivering different types of projects and deliverables, and also very much looking forward in the next few months to consolidate the dissemination aspect of our work. So really to support the fostering the adoption of the learnings and recommendations by the GPAI members. And lastly, on the next slide, just a quick illustration of what I was saying around scaling up project to augment the impact and engaging with the ecosystem from the different members' country. So 2 examples. One example on the left-hand side of the slide, funding that was received by the UK government on data justice and data trust, funding that was received and then redistributed with our delivery partners in the UK. And another example on privacy enhancing technologies with Singapore government, where funds were engaged into the Singapore ecosystem to really support practical demonstration of privacy enhancing technologies, the project that was presented by Shamik. So these are two examples of how we support the collaboration and scaling up of the different projects of the working group. So that was really, in a nutshell, very high level highlights of the support that we're providing. Thank you very much, Jenny.
Thanks so much, Sophie. Okay, and we are now into the Q&A sessions. Thank you so much for all of the questions that have been coming in. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through all of them, but we should have a good crack at them. So there are a couple, as Sophie alluded to, about how to get involved. And I think there are a few ways to do that. The first, and I'm going to ask Kushal to share the link for this, is to nominate yourself as an expert to join GPAI as a working group member and to become part of the MEG, the Multidisciplinary Expert Group. So please, I definitely encourage you to do that. The other thing is that we often have calls for delivery partners for the various projects that we take part in. So follow along with the with SEMIA, with the GPAI Twitter feeds and other kind of information that it gets put out, because there are often calls for delivery partners that you could get involved with. But more generally, please, if there are any of these projects that you are interested in, get in touch with us or the team at SEMIA in order to be brought into those projects. And we're very happy to link up and to talk and work with you. So that's how we'd like other experts to be involved. I'm going to rattle through the questions, and I've queued up some of our experts here and co-leads here to answer them, and we'll see how far we get. So one question from Samo: there's a new term, equity, that is used within the Council of Europe in relation to assuring human rights. Alison, can I ask you, how does that idea of equity relate to data justice?
Thanks very much, Jenny. It's a very important, and it's quite directly linked to the issues of data justice. So let me just briefly explain that in policy terms. So I think the main issue is really when it speaks about assuring human rights, in the sense that if one applies rights equally to different categories of people experiencing different harms, for example, or different unevenness of opportunities, then you would continue to perpetuate existing imbalances. So the issue of equity as opposed to equality in policy and governance is really to deal with the issues of redress. If you want to actually correct those imbalances or injustices, and you will need to apply, for example, in the language again, positive discrimination. So your regulation would be, there would be positive regulation in that you would require companies to do certain things, for example, to allow people to exercise their rights around informed consent, for example. If informed consent is done in long, English language legalese, people who are using that, who do not speak English or do not have legal knowledge, etc., would not be able to exercise their rights around privacy. So you would need to set up both form and content that allows people to exercise those rights.
Thank you, Alison. Moving on to the next question, Sridhara asks, some of the data sets in the projects that we're doing, and particularly I'm thinking the PETS Plus project, are cross-functional. How are those heterogeneous data sets managed, and are you using any synthetic data to fill the gaps? So Shamik, I'm hoping you'd answer that question.
I will, but I'll do a bit of a cop-out, Sridhar. So what I mean is the specific project we worked on, it didn't have heterogeneous data set. It would have had if we tried to do some of the other ambitious projects that we were looking for. We were indeed looking for heterogeneous data coming together from different sources. That's not what we ended up with, because, as I mentioned, we had a lot of issues there. But the broader question is absolutely relevant. I'm not sure there's any golden, a silver bullet to that. I think old school data management has to be done. Actually, even in this case, even though the data set was homogeneous, we had to do some degree of, or the team had to do some degree of standardization and clean up, not standardization, in order to make it work well. So I'm afraid no silver bullet answer. It's got to be done the old school way. I'm also an ex-chief data officer, so I like doing things old school in this instance.
Thanks, Shamik. Next question is from Amin, who is asking about the TDIF. So that's the framework for assessing data institutions, trustworthy data institutions, and asking whether there are any advocacy steps planned by the working group to ensure that at least the member states commit to the proposed framework in their efforts on data collection and sharing. And I'm actually going to direct this at Sophie. Is that okay, Sophie? As how would you see like GPAI as a whole supporting getting member states to adopt some of the recommendations that are coming out of that project, but also some of the other projects?
Thanks, and very good question on Amin's part. And I'll also turn to Teki just on stage to jump in, but I think that the first step would be kind of having a conversation with that group and presenting, and probably around the workshop discussing with the member state their feedback on the framework, noting as well that the data institutions framework as we have it now needs to be piloted and consolidated, as well as highlighted to Teki. So I think that it's kind of actually a good timing to also engage into conversation with the TDIF team, and then afterwards bringing a broader conversation. I don't know if it answers the question in terms of next steps.
Yeah, I think that there's also a general, more general point about the outputs from the GPAI work being adopted by member states, which is, our approach to that has generally been to try and work with the member states and with the people who we want to adopt that work as much as possible. But we don't have a formal route for like forcing adoption of this work. So it really is a much more kind of best efforts basis. On to a question from Anthony, which I was going to again direct to Alison. Are there any frameworks that have been developed or that you recommend to audit for responsible data use and effective data governance?
Thanks, Jenny, and thanks for a very interesting question. So just to preface this with, I'm not a data scientist, and I'm probably in many ways person least able to answer this. But just from the data justice point of view, there is very significant work done on auditing data sets. And particularly, I refer to the work of Abebe Behani. I'll pop her link to her work on auditing of data sets and data justice, which really critiques a number of these models and highlights the lack of curation, the opaqueness of these data sets, and the fact that because they are inherently biased, these very big data sets with, half the world not even connected to the web that they're using in order to generate their data and their information, means that you are, by using the existing data, you are perpetuating those historical and social injustices. And she gives examples from, misogyny to pornography to just exclusion and discrimination. So if you look at those, and she refers specifically to the OpenAI CLIP models, she speaks about various models and the different problems with them. And of course, with the generative AI, there's been more recent work done by her and others on that, particularly looking at the later versions actually having no annotation or curation possible because they're so large now, but also that there's no information on how those models are developed and being used.
Thank you, Alison. I'm going to move us on to the next question, which is, what is the position or status of GPAI and the regulation of AI? And I was wondering, Emma, are you okay to take that?
Yes, I'm happy to take this. The GPAI from the steering committee has not taken any real steps towards making the GPAI an international body that will, develop regulation. It is true that in the latest G7 meeting at Hiroshima, the GPAI was mentioned several times alongside the OECD to be the two international organizations that the G7 feels are best prepared and capable of working together towards not just policies, but all kinds of issues. We are in the process of establishing how to best leverage from each organization. But at the moment, there is not official answer in this regard that I can really provide publicly.
Thank you, Imma. I'm going to, there are a couple of questions that were addressed to Shamik, and I think he's answered several of those just in text. So I'm going to just ask this one. One challenge to pets take up seems to be the cost. How do we overcome this, Shamik?
So 3 thoughts. One is technology continues to move on, and I believe some of the progress there clearly helps. Second, I referred to it in my presentation. You can actually reduce the cost quite significantly by looking at either which data elements you don't need or which data elements you don't need to protect. So in the model that we shared, I believe there were just 2 or 3 critical ones that needed to be protected. But the third one is actually perhaps the most important point here, which is how do you think of cost? If you think of cost as something that is kind of trying to do the same thing, of course it'll look more costlier, because you can already, if you had access to the underlying data, or you had no need of the underlying data, and you could do a perfectly good job without using pets, then of course it'll be costly. But if you start thinking about the cost of not bringing all of that data together and not getting the impact that you get by bringing it together, then I think that becomes different. And the reason I mentioned this is that all the successful cases, I've now looked at a few successful cases in pharma research, they only come about because the benefit side is so much higher that those costs become less significant, both the commercial costs and the risk related to that. So I think that is probably the secret to this. It's not just about the cost side, it's the relative cost compared to what you could not achieve if you didn't use pets.
Thank you, Shamik. Next question, Rachel, you've said that you will answer. So plans for the GPAI Data Governance Working Group to address the geographical imbalance of available AI training data to make AI work for everyone. Rachel.
Yeah, I just thought this was a great question, and it's something that we will be integrating as a sub-question within the survey that we send out to understand how governments are currently sharing data and what kind of data they're sharing. So that was the only point I wanted to make. There may be others that want to come in on this one.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is that we did a piece of work very near the start of the Data Governance Working Group coming together to look at the role of data in AI in general, and the lack of data sets around, in particular, minority languages was one of the things that really came up as an issue. So I'd encourage people to go and have a look at that report and the things that were recommended there. We do not have a project currently that is looking to address that. But obviously it's come in various ways in other pieces of our work. Inma, you wanted to add something?
Yes, just for the sake of transparency, I would really be very grateful for this person to state his or her name. I just don't think it's appropriate to have an anonymous person asking questions and we have no idea who this person is.
Okay, they may be able to do that through the Q&A function. I'm going to skip us down to a question that came in from Nitendra on a viewpoint on data ownership in the generative AI era, with lots of questions around copyright, especially for creative content. And I was wondering if Christiana could give a viewpoint on that and talk about how we're going to investigate it.
Yes, sure. Excellent question. Exactly. This is why we put the CodeGen project on track. The idea of code generation and what it could mean for the digital economy started mostly with like raw data, which we find in the IoT sector. And then very rapidly, it became clear that there are lots of further applications, and generative AI being one of the most prominent. Generative AI is trained on what millions of people have produced and what is on the internet. So a lot of it may be copyright protected, a lot of it may be protected by other regimes, which is both relevant from an ethical and from a legal perspective. And this is precisely the starting point for the CodeGen project. So thank you so much for the excellent question.
Excellent. We've almost made our way through the questions that are remaining. There are a couple that are asking about delivery, becoming a delivery partner, and I think Sophie, if you don't mind sharing links and typing answers to those, then that would be great. Rachel, I wondered if you might tackle the question, is there an inherent tension between community rights in data and government rights in data? And what could be equitable ways to resolve this friction? And then we'll wrap up the Q&A section.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes and no, but if we understand data as something that can be and should be reused and used for multiple reasons and in multiple ways, that there may be ways of resolving these kinds of tensions with the right governance mechanisms. So I think it depends a little bit more on use and the value that can be reaped from data and how we connect that. Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. I just note in the Q&A box that Jacques de Toit from UNESCO has noted the work that UNESCO is doing on minority language data sets, so I encourage you to check that out as well. But I think I'm going to wrap up the Q&A and pass back to Mr. Singh for wrapping us up.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Jenny, and all the experts for giving such a interesting insights into the projects that you all have been working on. And I must say, I was personally quite enlightened, because very often we keep on debating these things, we keep on reading about it, but to get to hear from the individual project leads about what all is happening in this space is so very relevant. In India, of course, when we working on our own strategy, we are addressing the same questions. But where the more we get into it, we realize that the challenges we all are facing across are very similar. And it also emphasizes the need for talking to each other, the need for learning from each other and try to sharing insights into it. So all the experts, Alison, Teki, Shamik, Dr. Christian, Rachel, Sophie, the insights that we got from the presentations was very good. I was wondering, I will get into my team and maybe the support of the Secretariat and try to see if we can document these. Like, of course, those who joined the session have been benefited greatly, but if we can somehow document the work which has been done by the expert groups and come up with a publication that we can put on the GPAI website and share with those who could not join today, it will be really of great value. And the interest that we have seen from the participants, given the number of questions or the number of people who joined, we'll be happy to get more suggestions, more insights, learn more about what various countries are doing in the field of data governance, share with each other, and expand the community of knowledge and resources that we have. So I thank all the experts, all the participants who joined in from all over for this first convening. It has given us a lot of ideas, and going ahead will be similarly we're planning the other convenings on the other working groups also. So with these words, I would like to ask if Inma would like to add something before we conclude.
Thank you very much. I just would like to add that it's really outstanding, the work that the Data Governance Group delivers. It's one of the most dynamics. The projects are not only incredibly relevant, but I think that they're growing to become massive pillars of future work, and also pillars for governments to build upon. And to all present today, I will reiterate our invitation. Join us as self-nominated experts. The GPAI is only stronger if the most committed and talented people work with us. So please join us and help create the strongest MEG that we can possibly build with your talent and your commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Enma. And before we conclude, Alan is also here. Would Alan want to add a few things from the Secretariat?
No, just thank you very much for organizing this. I think it's a very nice overview of excellent work from the data working group, and yeah, from the GPAI Secretariat. Of course, we stand ready to facilitate and we're thinking about new financing models and new ways to facilitate the work of the working groups. Not as involved in the day-to-day as the centers are, but we're there and supporting also with the calls for new experts. And yeah, anyway, I'm very happy to see that you have so many promising projects underway, and these are very interesting times for AI, and for, of course, data governance is a key aspect to that. In my previous role, I was working a lot on data governance on the OECD side. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and we will greatly be benefited by your work that you have done in OECD, and I'm sure GPAI and all of us will be benefited with the work that you have done. So with this, I would like to thank all of you for joining this, and thank you, and look forward to the other convenings that we'll have in the days to come. And last but not the least, I would like to thank the entire backend team, my own team at Ministry of Electronics and IT, Government of India, which have been working at the backend in trying to ensure that this becomes successful. So thanks everyone once again.